to prove that Muhammad Abdul Wahhab is the forefather of ISIS. That what they're following today is a heretical Salafiyah. It's not the same as Muhammad Abdul Wahhab. It's heretical, brother. It's heretical. It's no way connected to what Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab was promoting and the early Najdiyah. It's a heretical movement. Believe me, it's no way connected. What happened then? Muhammad Abdul Wahhab, this is now, wrote letters to the tribes in Central Arabia.
Yeah. Calling them back to Tawheed.
Calling back to Tawheed and your mushriks and this, that. Now, naturally, Muhammad Abdul Wahhab believes that's it. It's done. I've done my Balugh al-Hujjah, I've done my Iqam al-Hujjah, and then he started al-Ghazawat. He started the jihad, okay? Because he was fighting al-Mushrikun.
But it's also important, brother, and I have to keep saying this.
Go for it.
There is no records currently that exists, and none that I've read from my extensive reading into Ottoman history.
No, I'm not talking about Ottoman history.
No, I'm talking about that even when those Ghazawat began with those different various Arab tribes within the peninsula.
There were no letters.
There were no letters.
And he was politically motivated, brother.
There was no letters. There was no, you know, when we hear very commonly, don't criticize the ruler, give nasiha privately,
hold him by the hand.
Hold him by the hands, tell him nicely. There was none of this.
None of that.
There was none of that.
Okay, so then they started pillaging tribes, started pillaging, killing, slaughtering, and I've done a 2-part series on it. You've watched it. So Muhammad Abdul Wahhab declared those around him to be mushrikeen and polytheists. Muhammad Abdul Wahhab met Muhammad bin Saud in 1165, and it's documented in the book. That was 1165.
Oh, you're talking about Hijri.
I'm talking Hijri, sorry. So that would have been, I don't know the Hijri calendar.
Yeah.
1165. From 1165 all the way to 1206, they pillaged. They slaughtered.
It was a
they
bloodbath.
killed.
It was a bloodbath.
Under the pretext that they were mushrikun. Now they argue, I've heard this argument now, even from the ones who are quite mellow, by the way, because the spiritual godfathers, Muhammad Abdul Wahhab, they got to defend him at all costs. You know what they say?
It was his.
Abu Bakr fought the Murtaddun.
Okay, well let me just nip that one in the bud. Yeah,
okay.
First and foremost,
Yeah.
those grave worshipping mushrikun who were actually realistically were Muslims. They may have been misguided. But to kind of have a generic takfir and to excommunicate them in such vast numbers. You have to remember that Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, when he dealt with the Murtaddin of the time, that's because he did not differentiate between the Salah and the Zakah. These are people who were paying Zakah to the Ottoman state.
Thank you.
These are people who were paying, they were fulfilled.
And there were 1,000 years in Islam, by the way, and the Murtaddun Abu Bakr were recently converted Muslims.
And there were people who, and they were given allegiance to false prophets at that time.
At that time as well. Yeah.
So that's just some madness. Just a madness. But the argument I have heard is that this was Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab's ijtihad based on what was apparent in terms of practices that had become very prevalent in the peninsula.
Okay.
But even then, I find it so difficult to understand how that could justify the death and destruction that took place.
Okay, let me give you one example to sort of highlight the massacres, and like I'd like to call it, him being the forefather of ISIS. I'll give you one example that will shock you to your core, from their own books, from their own testimony. There was a tribe, 2 tribes in fact, and they were Murtaddun, as they were. Because Muhammad Abdul Wahhab and the early Najdiyah were the only Muslims on the planet. And we're going to get to 1811, we're going to get to that as well. So don't worry about it. We're going to just, because what we want to do, we want to show you the reality on the ground during his time.
And the backdrop.
And the backdrop. So you can't separate him from the atrocities that happened after his death.
Yeah.
Because he laid down the foundation.
Of course.
You understand?